want to know the secrets to longevity and not just surviving but thriving into old age? Then one of the best resources to look at are places called blue zones. These are places around the world where people have been found to live the longest and the healthiest. So where did the concept of blue zones even come from? Well, it started in around 2004 when Gianni Pes and Michael Pulane, they did some demographic work and they identified a region that had the highest concentration of male centurions, and they referred to it as a blue zone. And over the years, that data was expanded upon where they went to different places around the world and they found other societies that also long-lived people, and they found certain characteristics and traits that were prevalent across the board for all of them. We're going to go into some of the specifics in a little bit, but in general, how you want your food broken down in terms of carbs, fats, and proteins, I always recommend, to make it simple to my clients or people I speak to, is you want a 60-20-20 split between carbs, fats, and proteins. So you want to be consuming mainly carbs, and a general thing they found here is that 95% of that you want it to come from plant foods. So you want to primarily have your diet composed of plant foods. So first off, we're going to talk about eating more plants. So looking at the Adventist health studies, which are great studies, I highly recommend you looking into them. They found that people who are vegans, vegetarians, basically had mostly plant-based diets. They're the ones who happen to survive the longest and have the best health overall. And also in places like Okinawa, they substitute pork and meat with things like extra firm tofu, which is high in protein, and it also has cancer-fighting phytoestrogens, which I think is really interesting to point out because there definitely are studies showing that phytoestrogens fight cancer in men and women, and men who are concerned about phytoestrogens and lowering your testosterone. There's also been studies done on vegetarians and vegans, and they find that on average their testosterone is higher than the counterparts who consume meat and dairy. In a lot of these blue zones, they found that people do consume meat, but a lot of them, they actually consume fish as their primary protein source, and when they do consume fish, they typically eat the smaller fish, and that's because the ones that are higher up on the food chain, there's a higher chance that they are going to build up mercury and other PCBs and chemicals inside their bodies through bioaccumulation. So you want to avoid those types of fish, and if you're going to eat fish, you want to eat smaller fish like sardines. So reduce meat, eat more plants, got it. What about dairy? Well, basically, dairy, you want to avoid it for the most part. So dairy, it's high fat and it's high in sugar content, so that's a big issue for a lot of people. Also, the vast majority of people, around 60% or more around the globe, they are lactose intolerant. You lose that lactase enzyme whenever you're a young child after you're done breastfeeding from your mother, so you typically can't break down milk and dairy very well. And eggs, people in blue zones, they eat nowhere near the amount of eggs that most Americans eat. So, I mean, you can still have eggs, but trying to reduce them as best as you can. Eggs you just have to be careful with because they're really high in saturated fats, they're really high in cholesterol, so you got to be careful in terms of that with blood pressure and vascular issues. And then in blue zones, though, something to recognize is that the eggs that they eat, it's from chickens that are free range, they're fed natural foods, and they don't receive antibiotics. Basically, they're not altered or changed like a lot of our food is here in the United States. And I personally recommend avoiding eggs because there's a lot of issues with eggs in terms of higher rates of certain cancers, kidney problems, also circulatory issues like I mentioned before. If you're not eating as much meat, you're not eating as much dairy, what are you going to substitute those calories for? A big thing, a healthy thing you can substitute with is beans. So they recommend eating at least a half cup of cooked beans. Is something in the blue zones they eat a lot of. It's the cornerstone of most longevity diets in the world, and the reason for that is that compared to vegetables and fruits, which are also very healthy and good for us, beans, they pack a lot of calories, a lot of proteins, a lot of fats, a lot of carbs, and they're pretty well balanced in terms of a food source. And so people in the blue zones, they eat a lot of beans, almost 4 times the amount as those average Americans do. And so definitely we could add more beans into our diet and we would definitely benefit. Also, they're a great source of fiber. And in terms of eating sugar, we are eating way too much sugar. I think most Americans understand that by now. In most blue zones, they're eating maybe 28 grams of sugar max. And they eat it more intentionally and not so habitually like we do. And they're also getting most of their sugars that are occurring naturally in fruits, vegetables, a little bit of milk and dairy products, things like that. So from more natural sources rather than refined processed sources. And processed sugar is something that's just become a more and more prevalent issue as time has gone on because there's a lot of hidden sugars in our food supply here in the US. When you look at tomato sauces, yogurts, sodas, obviously, everyone knows soda has sugar in it. So a lot of these things have so much sugar and they've been loaded up with more sugar as the years go on, kind of, hidden beneath the surface, so to speak. And sugar has so many different issues and problems. There's tons of studies on the negative impacts of sugar. It suppresses your immune system, it spikes your insulin levels, contributes to diabetes, lower fertility, it contributes to making you fat, and it can also shorten your life overall. So definitely want to try to minimize the amount of sugar we eat. Something definitely that you should be snacking on and consuming is nuts instead of things like potato chips or something that's loaded with sugar. So definitely try and eat more nuts. Adventist Health Study mentioned again here that nut eaters happen to live non-nut eaters by an average of 2 to 3 years. So nuts are definitely good for us, especially for our brain health. So breads here in America, you really want to avoid. They're not very healthy. A lot of them are made with bleached white flour, which metabolizes into sugar basically instantly inside of your stomach. It spikes your insulin levels, creating all these issues, contributing to diabetes. And in the Blue Zones, if you're going to eat bread, really what you want to do is follow their lead, where they're eating mostly fresh sourdough and also 100% whole wheat bread, which has more fiber and nutrients and doesn't dissolve as quickly inside of your body and cause such high insulin spikes. Big thing here, and this is what I always recommend to people first and my clients as well, is that you want to try and go the whole food route. You want to try and get your nutrients, your fibers, your minerals from whole plant foods. You get the entire package there. You get the fiber, you get the nutrients, you get the phytochemicals, you get the antioxidants, the cancer fighters. You get all these benefits that are already packed inside of these foods. These are what we're naturally designed for. This is what our bodies benefit most from. So we want to be getting the entire package, want to be eating the whole foods as much as possible. Last big thing here is that when we're drinking things, we mostly want to drink water. And if we're not drinking water, maybe we have some coffee, we have some tea, we have some wine, things like that aren't too bad. Those are actually pretty healthy for us for the most part. And the biggest thing is that we want to avoid soft drinks. That's the Blue Zones diet. Those are kind of the secrets to living a long, healthy life. And I'm kind of interested to know down in the comments below, what do you feel would be easiest to implement? What do you feel like would be most difficult to implement? Let's have some discussions down in the comments, and hope you guys stay happy and healthy. Peace.